Hey, Garfield. How are you, sir? Why not get started? So this is Cyversity's Engage. This is Cyversity's Engage, our monthly hustlers group. This group was formed by a whole group of myself and a group of mentees, some of which are on the call today. As mentees, they decided they wanted to have an ongoing conversation every month about relevant topics to their careers, their career development, and where they were going relative to formerly ICMCP, but now Cyversity and their cybersecurity practitioner development. We've determined as part of our hustlers group, our monthly hustlers group, that we would have a broad range of conversations and interviews about a multiple of subjects, most surrounding the cybersecurity practitioner or the cybersecurity industry that we're involved in, but we wanted to diversify. And one of those conversations is what we're having today with Leonard S. Johnson from AIEDC, but I'll get it right. In the meantime, what I wanted to do, AIEDC. In the meantime, what I wanted to do is sort of run through our normal stuff. This is Cyversity. And if you're looking at the screen, you'll see that Cyversity provides support to our members, as we help them navigate through their cybersecurity journey. We go through exploration of their engagement, provide them with access to skills assessments. We help them develop through a multiple of their development processes, and we also connect them with networking and chapters, and also with employment opportunities. You can see our website at the bottom there. So if you're not a member, here's where you go to join. Of course, you know our mission is to consistently have the representation of women and minorities in the cybersecurity industry. It's what we've been doing for the past nearly 7 years. And that's been our mission and our motto, and that's been our focus. Here are the ground rules for today. We always know that we have to mute our phones, mute our computers, unless we're going to come off and ask a question directly to the interviewee or the guest speaker. Our conversations are usually 45 minutes. They usually go a lot longer. They focus on diversity, they focus on leadership and inclusion, and they focus on a lot of other things as well. There's going to be a question and answer period at the end of the conversation. So either put your questions in the chat box, right? Or either put your questions in the chat box, or I know most of you are very glib and love to talk, so you'll come off mute and you'll come from mute and ask Leonard your question directly. The session is being recorded, right? And will be distributed upon request. This last piece here, I wanted to jump over. This is our link that we should be going to at the end of each session to voice your opinions and to engage in a survey. There you'll be able to tell the organization, because Cyversity is very focused on metrics and what we accomplish, what we're trying to accomplish, and what we do for the communities and the populations that we serve. So at the end of the conversation, please go to this link, right? And I could put it in the chat. I could put that link in the chat so that you all can go to that link and voice your opinion. Something there. Hey Sheldon, what's up, buddy? How you doing, man? Glad to see you. And so let me back up here to our speaker today. His name is Leonard. Leonard S. Johnson. He is the CEO of Artificial Intelligence Economic Development Corporation, and he will explain what that is in our ensuing conversation. He's a Stanford grad. You see, he's got that Stanford hat on, that Stanford mock neck. you see, and there you go. He's a Stanford grad, and very proud of that. It's an accomplishment that I think is great as well. And he's a member of a number of organizations that you can see at the bottom there. He's worked with that United Nations, AI for Good. He's worked with a couple of other organizations like the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, and he's got some other, some pretty interesting accolades himself that he's been involved in. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing and get us back to our get us back to our open session here. Hey, I can see a lot of great faces. Thank you all for coming and attending. And you know, I've got my first question for Leonard. All right. You know, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last couple of weeks. We've gotten to know each other personally and professionally, especially relative to both of our entrepreneurial engagements, our academic engagements, our commercial engagements. But it's always better coming from the horse's mouth as to who we're talking to today and who we're interviewing today. So Leonard, tell the audience about who you are personally, and give us all an idea of who you are, please.
Okay, so actually, and as you know, David, but I'll let you formally, for friends and everyone, I go by LS, so it makes it easier, because there's a lot of Leonards out there anyway. So LS, and like, just like LA, you just replace the A with an S. And that's intriguing, but from the old school, and I'll share this interesting, because I'll start laughing, because me and David, we started exchanging stories of Brooklyn versus inner city Los Angeles. And so I grew up in the inner city of Los Angeles, South Central Compton area. When I was a kid, single mother, never knew my real father. I do have a son, and I'm very still close with his mother, which I'm proud to say. She's actually from Ethiopia. And my son's a 4.6 student in a STEM school, so he's doing well. But how did I get there? See, so that's where I'm at today. It's like, some people will say Stanford was, you know, I completed Stanford in 2016. That was post-grad work. I'm getting a PhD in AI as well, in addition to running the company. But it isn't, I think it could sound more ambitious than it does, or more accomplishments, but I think the road getting there has always been paved for me since I was young, kind of growing up in the inner city, the hood, so to speak, and figuring out a way where, at that point, if you grew up in that environment, you know, and we're talking circa, you know, a good 35 years ago or so. So if you grew up in those areas during that time, one of the ways you would keep your mind focused, and I guess I was always, you know, I don't say I guess, I know that God blessed me with a good brain. So I could always calculate and think about things, but it was always also, I think every individual is faced with choices, you know, which do I go for the greater good and the higher end, or do I go with what's easy in front of me? And so I kept my mind focused on academics and tech sort of at the time, to stay out of trouble. Because other than that, I would have been in trouble. I was playing basketball and sports and everything. And that's kind of just, if you grew up in that environment, given you're kind of forced to make those choices. And what I learned early on was that economics were a key foundation to everything, which that began to be, for me, the glue of like, why does all of this, you know, I just went through the 6 iterations of who, what, why, when, where, how. And a lot of times I think when people do that, they are, you know, sometimes you're born, you know, I call it the Providence of Birth, what country you're born in, or what family you're born into, and at what time or time period on the Earth cycle that you're born into. This is what I call the Providence of Birth, and one really can't change that. You know, you can't control that, and to beat yourself up about it doesn't really serve yourself or anyone else, or what you might do in your purpose in life. So I began to, once I figured that out, I began to look mentally and abstractly begin to look abroad, and like, why is the inner city so poor? Why do, you know, you got good people trying to do their best to make 2 ends meet? Who, you know, why? And I went down sort of that red pill. They call it the matrix, the red and blue pill now, but I just took the red pill when I was younger, and began to see the glue was economics, which is much different really than making money or making revenue. It's a fundamental systemic change at the very foundation of things. And when you understand that, I think I just did it in reverse order. So I just started figuring out, versus, you know, you can look from the bottom up and be like, okay, if I make this money, I'm gonna be good. But then what happens next year, the year later? What happens if the system changes, and so forth? So that's kind of where, I'm just trying to make it short too. I can go on and
on, but what I've learned about LS is we're not going to have to ask to fill the time, because LS can definitely fill the time with antidotes and with comments and statements. In the time that I've worked as a mentor with the folks that have been assigned to me, I've noticed that everybody has a why, right? They got a why, they got a reason why why they've selected or chosen the things that they have chosen to focus on. Some folks are, well, everybody's got a why in their life's mission, LS. I mean, what's your why? What's your why? And then we're going to move into artificial intelligence after this question. But what's your why in life? I mean, what's your, I think I remember hearing you talk about that triangle, right?
Oh yeah.
That triangle. I'm gonna say that triangle where you find out what you're good at, you find out what the world needs, you find out what you love. And the intersection between those three happens to be your why. What is your why?
So yeah, and the whole thing about that intersection triangle, which is intriguing, because when I heard it at a conference, it was drawing three lines, right? So, and it actually said, what are you good at? And actually, because your skill set, good at is defined by skill set. Some people are just naturally good at sports or whatever. So your skill set, what you're good at, may not be what you love, and what you love may not be what you're good at, and neither one of those may not be what the world needs at that time. And that's what I meant by earlier referencing the providence of birth. At the time you're born, and not just where you're born and what family you're born into, but look, we're born in we were born at a time where we're able to experience a vast change in technology, which we're able to all talk on, these little smart computers called cell phones and other devices. So we're born at a unique time versus if we were born in the 1800s, so to speak, right? So then when you talk about the purpose and intersecting those three to that why, looking back of what I was good at, I was always good, naturally good at is correlation. And it's interesting because my brain works sort of in a grid pattern. I can cluster thoughts together and weave a pattern in my head. And it's just, some would say that I've learned later on in life that I was probably had some form of synesthesia where, on the spectrum, where I can see patterns clearly in my head before people could usually calculate them on a piece of paper. And I could just see where they're going, especially in a sense of macro trends versus, micro issues. And so when you're able to figure that out, and I think, David, me and you talked about it sometimes, it's like even when I was young growing up in church, and I would be asking, the preacher, like, okay, so why aren't we going over this scripture? But that doesn't say, make sense to this context. And the other books say this and that, and he'd be like, you're going way too far for this lesson. But that why was then, for me, I saw that there was a purpose of conveying and dispelling knowledge, because true knowledge is to understand something. They say knowledge is power. That's sort of the smaller thing that's always said. But to know something means when one knows something, they understand. And in the English language, some of the words understanding literally meant, David, to stand under something. So when they used to talk about, I understand, if you were at a bridge, and we were talking about the bridge in Texas as an example, where the migrants are, you would understand, if you were an engineer, how the bridge was made, because you're standing under the bridge. But if you're on top of a bridge, like a highway bridge, you could not and even if you're an engineer, you really couldn't understand the structure unless you were standing under the bridge, because then you would see all the, sort of looking inside out of the mechanics of machines. So that word understand or understanding means you really understand something. You're standing under. It's the reverse order of the actual word. To stand under means to understand. And when you begin to think that way, it opens up your mind, I would say, to very much see purpose is just to convey knowledge. A lot of knowledge is not out there. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of data. But then a lot of people, you go back to that why collectively. Why are we, everyone could say, okay, we're very, as humanity collectively, we're very capable of having a lot of much more prosperity and less violence and war, so to speak. And everyone says, well, it's corrupt people and yada yada, and I get all that. But if you look at the majority, they'll say, oh, there's people that like to control everything. But a lot of it also has to do with the majority of the masses or people don't have that knowledge. They don't have that awareness, that understanding, and so we're sort of pushed along, sort of this sort of cattle thing, collectively, and each individual. I mean, we all must take responsibility. So individually we fall into it, collectively we fall into it, and
Right.
why I came up to conveying and communicating knowledge, because from the inner city, I saw that people did things as a result of their circumstances, and or they didn't have they didn't have enough knowledge to understand how they could do something different.
Right.
Like,
Interesting.
and I'm not talking about the parents working and everything. I'm talking about the hustlers or the ones that say, well, I'm gonna make my money the way I need to make my money, or I'll join a gang if I join a gang. I'll do what I gotta do. And when you really pinpoint it down, it's like, if you can ever see those people later in life, they'll tell you the mistakes they made because they didn't have an understanding or knowledge of something at a young enough age to pivot differently.
Got it. Got it. I think I've captured it. Captured the why is that circumstances, situational scenarios help us make a decision as to where we go. But your specific why seems to be around democratization of
What was that?
democratization of AI. That's part of your why. And so I wanted to spend a couple of
and democratization of knowledge in of itself, because artificial intelligence or AI is basically a simulated intelligence that we as humans have. So it would be about the democratization itself of knowledge, and I mean knowledge in of itself. We have skill sets and trainings, right? We can learn cybersecurity, you can learn AI, those kind of things. But an overview of knowledge in of itself, that would be, probably my biggest why would be a democratization of knowledge, and then in specific skill sets and so forth in areas.
And then my next question sort of leads to that. Well, I know you want to do a democratization of knowledge and as well as a democratization of AI, but I mean, what is AI? I mean,
well, the camps are it's so funny. It really, it's, and that's a reverse word too. It literally is a reverse word. It's intelligence that is artificial or simulated from that which we as humans, because it was first coined in the 50s, we as humans recognize as intelligence, right? And in the technical world or in the computer science CS world, they'll say the Turing test, if it can pass the Turing test, which we did years ago, which is a test that basically says a computer or some type of device, something that's not human, and I'm not talking alien, something that's man-made, can trick a human being into thinking it's human. So if we were having a call with an Alexa or something, and but that's been passed before. You can do it even if you're just, typing like a bot, tricking that it's human, which is actually getting to cybersecurity, is how a lot of bots, and malware phishing emails trick humans into giving their accounts up there, because people actually think this is a human something via their device or their computer. So they're like, oh, I'm customer service at your bank. Can you please send me this stuff? Person, it's in real time, but it's a bot. That's the Turing test, right? So some would say that's artificial intelligence because it kind of duped or tricked a human into thinking that they were speaking with another human, or communicating is the better word,
right.
with another human. But artificial intelligence itself, I mean, the reason why I said there's two camps on this, because the deep science community, I'm talking deep tech, because I'm also part of that. I mean, really, when you drill down, and these are, AGI scientists and so forth. We're still, that question is still being answered or posed or posited, because we still don't know what we really don't know of what is intelligence. Because we've rated this to say artificial intelligence is something different, but then I think humanity is still questioning itself, or at least the scientific community is questioning itself, like what is real intelligence, and that's where we get to what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, or where we get to artificial super intelligence. But intelligence of itself is what is intelligence, and that's sort of a philosophical question that we're still questioning. We ourselves as humans say, well, we're intelligent, but and because we're able to look down at an ant, let's say a little ant, right? And we're like, well, we're superior than that ant is, that singular ant. We're superior, so we're much higher than they are, so we're intelligence. But we don't know the perspective is there something in the universe, or if we looked at it from God's perspective, are we that ant, or are we even lesser as far as the intelligence we are aware of how this universe is and our existence is and everything else? So to answer the question fairly, and to scientists, we're still questioning what intelligence is, but artificial intelligence is something that simulates humans' ability to cognize. The normal formal definition is something that can simulate cognitive abilities. Like, so it can calculate, or it can, let's say, driving an autonomous car. It's something that can simulate, and I say simulation because in reality that's what it's doing. It's simulating
Right.
human driving a car. So we would call it normal. That's the quote unquote normal answer for artificial intelligence.
Right, right. And so it sounds as if it's intelligence, but it's artificially designed, but we're still questioning what indeed is intelligence, and do we even have divine or total intelligence? And so the question still reverberates, and it just bounces around.
It does.
You're the CEO, right? You're the CEO of Artificial Intelligence Economic Development Corporation. And from what I've read and what I've seen, with an organization that's if you don't mind me saying, it's kind of a startup, but you've got a lot of patents, you've got a lot of service marks and things that you've developed. But you seem to be focusing on deploying or democratizing AI ubiquitously to different economic sectors and structures, right? So, what I'm trying to get to is that there are lots of, to me, I think there are a lot of AI applications. What are those AI applications? And I want to start from societal applications, then I want to move to personal applications, and then finish up with commercial applications. Probably going to take about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to get there. But let's start with societal applications for artificial intelligence. What can it do? What can it solve? Thinking from a futuristic, because you're a futurist. I mean, this is who you are, and this is what you've been titled as by your colleagues in the.
I know. I think they're too kind, but anyway.
Kind or not, this is their belief, and these are some very well-placed intellectual thought leaders in think tanks. This is how they see you as a futurist. So, from a societal perspective, what can AI address and solve? Let's start there first, and then we'll move to the other 2 sections, if you will.
Oh, well, so a future designed that way and what we can do. And I like that, and I'll get a little bit, and I've said this before in other interviews too. I respect all world leaders for the position, not necessarily their politics or policies, but to be in that position, because they get a horizontal view of a country and or the world that most of us don't have the privy of. I mean, it's easy to, Monday night, what do they call it? Monday morning quarterback, Sunday night's game. But you weren't in the game. So, you're not playing on the field. And so I've been listening to Barack Obama's The Promised Land audiobook, and he talks about a lot of details where he read the whole audiobook himself, which impressed me. Took the time to actually narrate his own book, being post-president. And so it's like, so I'm going back, yes, we can, or what we can do with AI. We can definitely solve a lot of diseases, okay? Extend healthcare, extend longevity, excuse me. Definitely economic systems. That's why I created, AIEDC, that's the acronym for it, which is Artificial Intelligence Economic Development Corporation. We can definitely, that's, to me, is almost a no-brainer. And very, not, it's a simple understanding, but may take time to execute. But we can have, and a lot of economists have talked about this as well, we can have an economic system that isn't a yin-yang or a bust, and in sort of a peak and valleys all the time. And then we go through these recessions and then depressions, and then come out of that with inflation, et cetera. So we can definitely have an economic system that can work much more equitable and fairly. It won't be a utopia. I don't believe that will exist, on this earth. I think that's that's to God's point. And I think that's that at that nature. We won't have something where there'll be zero poverty or zero, disease. But we can get very close to mitigating these risks and reducing and being able to manage them with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Specifically, and then if you look, like I started off at the very beginning, in my opinion, because if we just looked at ourselves, in a lot of the sci-fi movies and other movies see this, there's a bunch of aliens coming, or there's a meteorite that's going to crash the earth. All of a sudden, all of the smart brains sort of get together and say, okay, how do we solve this? And some of the movies will show it where there was a scientist who was kicked out because of his crazy ideas, but they bring him back because he has the solution to blow up the meteorite without blowing up the earth. So we come together when there's this greater than earth problem. But other than that, there's a lot of sort of, infighting going on in sectorization, putting things in certain sectors. But we could definitely improve the economy globally, the economic system, and improve healthcare. And when you look at those two things, it kind of does fall down to economics. Like everyone wants, 99.9% of people, or 9.5 out of each, person, 10 people, very few people are like, I'm just bent on destruction. I just want to kill everything. Most of these people are doing that because of their circumstances and situations. And they just want to have what they want, like have a good life, be healthy, be wealthy, be wise, and enjoy this earth while they can. I mean, that's the goal of most people. I mean, it's in the 90 percentile. There's the rare or whatever that might just be psychotic and they just want to see destruction, but 92 or 93% are in that, or in that cluster of we want a better life. And if they could have it, if you said, okay, I'll give you, here's a wish, make one wish, they'll just say that. And you can go down the list and run that. So AI could bring about that to a closer gap, being able to, I think, reduce that gap out there. And then if we go into, and then I'll get into, that's societal. Your next question was it commercial?
Before you move on to that societal, so before you move from societal issues over to commercial issues, is AI a good tool to predict, for predictions? I think I've heard once, you might have said in one interview that we could have predicted the storm Ida coming on to shore in Louisiana and going up north, because that was the exact same track it took. How many years ago? 15 to 20 years ago?
I think it was 15 to 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you alluded, I don't know if you definitively or made the declarative statement that artificial intelligence, if used properly, could have predicted that incident happened. Is that something that you lean toward?
Yes. What you're talking about, and at the end of the day, it's what's known to the public and what's not, to cause panic and so forth. But I get that. But we're able to predict the weather pretty accurately, or pretty close to a 10-day cycle. That cycle, and I think most scientists know that, can be extended much longer. There are variables that change, like let's say if weather patterns are influenced by other things. And the reason I'm going by weather, because this is actually weather, but it depends on how much you're processing. So I do want to be one clarification though. When I say prediction, and I've talked about this before, you do need that convergence of software, hardware. So AI in of itself is a software solution. Artificial intelligence is a software solution. It can be embedded into chips like the GP3 or the GPUs, graphical processing, units or interfaces or whatever you want to call them. But that's chips, graphical processing units. That's hardware. So when people are using their cell phones, they're looking at, like, let's say a smartphone today, you're literally using a combination of hardware and software. Okay, the software is what we're using. Zoom is software, all right? But it's on a hardware device, neither a phone or a computer. So the hardware has to be able to process this data visualization data and audio data, because we're streaming right now, we're streaming visual and we're streaming audio data. And so, yes, if we have quantum computers, because I'm heading there, and we're beginning to bring that online, then you could process, with AI systems, yes, you could actually know the trajectory of the storm, know that at least know the probability of it likely being this kind of a storm, even maybe 3 months out, and say this may occur, let's make provisions. Because, it's interesting to me, right? It's always like, and I don't know, sometimes if it can be people with different agenda, multiple agendas, or I think it's more, I don't think it's so hideous and evil as people would make it out, like there's some group at the top of the world that wants to control everything, so they love destruction. I think it's a lot of compartmentalization, and people are in their own silos, and they're sort of more territorial, so they don't communicate with each other from a horizontal perspective. So they're like, well, this is what I know. I know this, I'm very good at this, and I don't want to understand, I'm very good at B, and I don't want to understand C or A. And I'll just stay in my silo for B. Who cares about A or C, unless it affects me directly. And so when you look at the prediction, yes, artificial intelligence with the hardware could have, I believe, could have definitely predicted it, but made it extended further out, maybe like even 60 days or 90 days. And I'm talking about the hurricane when it hit, and the ability for governments to then be proactive, because a lot of this then is also economics, right? What happens if you have systems like, okay, so look, looks like we're going to get a category 5. Do we allocate resources there, or do we just wait and see?
Right.
And wait and see, and like, oh, it's so terrible, and all the people have suffered, and so.
Right. To the audience, to the attendees, if you want to come off mute and ask Leonard a question, Lawrence has got a question. If you want to come off mute, Lawrence, and ask him a question, or I could read it for you. Either way, but don't be shy, folks. You got questions. Let's ask Leonard questions relative to his background and his expertise.
Okay, yeah, I was working on a second question, but I'll just ask this one. I wanted to hear a little more about what you were just talking about with respect to the weather and the use of AI to predict it. You seem to be alluding to the inability or unwillingness of people to think systemically as a limiting factor in the useful application of artificial intelligence. And I just wanted to know, do I have that right? Is that one of the things that you seem to think is preventing us from using this technology and employing it for maximum benefit?
Great question, Lawrence. Yeah, but in all fairness, humans fear what they don't understand.
What they don't know.
What they don't, right. And so remember my first premise and how my brain works. My first premise was I really wanted to democratize knowledge, and AI is part of that knowledge, but democratization of knowledge, because to understand something, you don't have fear of it. And if more people understood AI, and that's part of one of my long-term goals and missions, and technology in and of itself, you don't fear, the fear reduces. And so to your point, systemically, I think it's more, and that's the belief. I mean, it's a choice I decide to believe in. Because and this could be a debate though. People could say, because I'm just one of these, my brain just goes way out. So you can say, oh, LS, what are you talking about? People are evil and they only want their own selves and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, if they were really that way, why are we even here? Why wasn't this earth destroyed 100 years ago, 500 years? I'm talking about level. I'm saying nothing, like nuclear. Somehow humanity, and I personally believe it's a supernatural being called God, but that helps that helps to guide us. But still, they could just, let's say they're atheists and they don't believe in God. So you still have to ask that, why aren't we not destroyed? How is it that we have generations on this earth still believe, and we're still doing the same thing, getting married, having kids, producing life. If we're that evil, right? Or if we're that selfish or that self-centered. So a lot of it, I think, beckons on fear. And people put their faith is always greater than fear. It's just, what do you put your faith in? And 1 second, I'm getting a call. All right. It's just, what do you put your faith in? I mean, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, because I got a call. I'm on my cell, so I rejected it. So it's, what do you put your faith in? And basically, if you put your faith in science, I happen to put it into God, and it's science as well, but I have a hierarchy, and I think it's a supernatural being. That's my personal belief and upbringing. But if you put your faith in that, it begins to mitigate the fear, and then you can go down the road of getting knowledge, because you don't fear. Like they say, if you look at an omnipresent being, or they say God is all knowing, there is no fear there. So we constantly have to be able to dispel fear, and that the best way to do that is with knowledge. And that's where I'm heading back to your question, Lawrence, about AI, because this whole, well, what happens to Skynet? It'll take us over. It'll be better. I get this to David. Me and David talked a little bit about this offline, like in the past, like what if AI took over my job, or it's going to like take Skynet me over and be bigger. But then if we went back 200 years, a normal era, or even 150 years, even that's short. If everyone on this call we're in a time machine, and we were back 100 years, 120 years, and we just saw an airline, American Airlines or Delta, flying in the sky, because we were all horse and wagon, right? We would go crazy. What is that? Is it a supernatural alien being? Is it? And all it would be is some humans in a plane going from New York to LA.
Oh, I got another question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I recently did a study on the Industrial Revolution and the relationship between the Industrial Revolution. Of course, we're going into a new Industrial Revolution now, but I did a study on that. Yeah, I did a study on that, and the relationship between, especially from the workforce and living conditions, how it worked then, the whole sort of motivation of the industrialists, and how those things relate to what we do today. Every application has got a weakness, every one of them. Aside from the fact that they're all developed, created, and designed by humans, what's AI's weakness?
Oh, this very simple part, that's a good question. Exploitation by maybe wrongdoers or evildoers or bad people. I would say that's one of the biggest weaknesses, or if not outside of it being really a system, it is a tool, literally. So we go back, I have to keep using it because people are familiar with it, but I don't like using it. But we go back to the whole hammer tool, it really, because it's effective at communication. So the hammer, I really believe that's one of the most effective tools that, humankind has built. We kind of had mallets of versions of that in the past, but the modern hammer, which is, carpenter, you're building a house, you're doing something, you hammer. But if you want it to be an evil tool, you just crack someone's skull and it becomes a weapon of destruction, right? So AI can be the same way with data, because it can give the ability, and I'm also, David, I don't know if you know, I'm in several different other groups. I'm part of the Advancement for Artificial Intelligence, AAAI. It's out of Stanford, or it's not out of Stanford, but it's out next to Stanford, which is the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. And so there was something that was signed about, when was that? About 2015, 2014, maybe 2016, where we signed, and Stephen Hawkins was part of that, to kind of sign this AI, Elon Musk as well. It was a signature of a lot of different scientists, about 3,000 or so around the world, to kind of say, let's keep this AI for good and make sure that we're always safeguarding. And I think humans are always going to need to be at that factor to safeguard what can be or cannot be done wrong. Because, you look at AI, it can be manipulated very easy on the data. Let's say if we get into AI wars where drones are flown, by artificial intelligence completely, and we're probably going to get there soon, because they can process the data without making a mistake. But if there was a nefarious individual that wanted to manipulate that, they could tweak that, like almost getting into cybersecurity. They could tweak that and then use it for its wrongful purpose. So that would be the, it's two sides of the same coin, or double-edged sword in that sense.
Gotcha. You said the magic word,
I think Owen
cybersecurity.
to say something too, David, just so we're clear, but go back.
Yeah, could I ask?
Well, hold on for 1 second, Lawrence. Hold on 1 second, Lawrence, because Carlos had a question.
Okay, sorry.
It was focused around cybersecurity, and you said the magic word, Lawrence, cybersecurity, which is most of the individuals that are on this monthly interview series are cybersecurity practitioners or developing to be cybersecurity practitioners. We got a couple folks here that are from city organizations, folks that are here from defense contractors. I see a couple folks here from financial agencies as well. But Carlos had a question relative to cybersecurity and artificial. Carlos?
Yeah, so I'll ask, so you're talking a little bit about it right now, but so since most of us are in cybersecurity, I was wondering, how do you see AI changing the field, and how can we prepare for that and take advantage of it so we can kind of stay on top of it?
Yeah, so on that, that's a pretty good point. And that's something I'm trying to look at the screens here. That's something, well, so there's kind of 4 pillars on that for AI specifically. And one is sort of detecting new threats. I'm just gonna go to if we can do the topics. I'll do the topics and then kind of give a narrative of it. So detecting new threats, bots in of themselves. I'm just giving you the pillars of where AI applies to cybersecurity. And then what is it? Breach? Yeah. Detecting breach, predicting breach risk. So a risk of a breach or break, so to speak. And then the last is endpoint detections. So let me unpack those. And so when you say malware threats, you look at a lot of what's going on, the phishing emails, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have AI systems, they can process data much more capable than normal software. Generally, software is I don't want to be too technical here. Software is an A or B component. Usually it's like, it's input, output, to solve a problem, fix that problem, that specific problem. That's what most software does. And please, guys, if anyone has questions or you're not sure, because, I like to make apologies because sometimes the way I talk, it's very clear in my head, but people are like, you are way here. So I can flush it down and bring it down if I need to, and please let me know. But I'm going to use the alphabet, all right? So follow me, because I want to give, Carlos, I want to give your answer the correct, the correct understanding that's in my head. So it's similar, and David's kind of heard this before. So it's an A, so think of the English alphabet as A to Z, right? A to Z, Z to A, 26 letters, it's horizontally across. Now think of a grid going A from 1 to 26. That's a 26 by 26 grid. So you got 26 levels. If you were going to take a grid, a cross grid, you got 26 levels down just on A. And then you got 26 levels down on B all the way across. That's a 26 by 26 grid. So AI kind of thinks in that cluster, where normal software would just be at column A, maybe column E as in energy, and column F. AI could go across, horizontally and vertically down at any particular pinpoint. So if you're talking about malware, and let's say malware is somewhere located between D15, that's level, letter D, 15th level, around let's say M25 and Z3. Okay, so M25, Z3, and I know this is just, it'd be easier if I was showing you on a chart, but I can walk it mentally. So that's sort of a V cluster if you looked at it, and this is where the points are where the malware is infecting itself. AI would just sweep across all the levels to be able to find that. That's in the malware protection. It can also do the same with the breach risk prediction with that same sort of grid analogy. It's looking for something. It's really looking for that needle in a haystack, okay? Because if you looked at and if let's just say we wanted to go further, let's pretend that we have a 26 by 26 grid, but then you could have iterations of even that where you could have you can have a grid, you could have a 26 by 26 grid on even A1. So now you're talking about a lot of data. So imagine when I said this 26 by 26 graph, imagine it going almost infinite. Like it can just keep going and going and going. For software to find that, the time it would take would be too long, where AI could sort of quantumly jump around and sort of find that needle in a haystack. And it could do the same thing for physical devices. That's your cell phones or your computers. That's endpoint protection. It can also do the same for bots, which also create a lot of the traffic on the internet. That's why a lot of bots it's very deceptive, because bots can trick systems into thinking that this is real traffic, and the system in the bots detection is sort of different. The other three are kind of clustered together for AI, which is malware, breach risk prediction, and that's getting back into AI prediction, and then also endpoint devices being connected. But on the side of bots are basically your traffic jam. So that's a different kind of problem that AI could solve, because bots could it just eats up resources, right? It's like you used to call them DNS attacks, right? So just everyone's like, oh, my shopping cart's being overwhelmed because, I can't take all these orders, but they're not really orders, so to speak.
Well, you asked the question, Carlos, and there you go. Hey, so Lawrence, could you ask your question, and after you, Jason, quick ask your question, please?
Yes, I was wondering if you could just share your thoughts on the current state of research around the ethical uses of AI and what backstops people in the artificial intelligence industry might be considering, whether, political, legal, technical, in order to prevent our machines, in order to enable humanity to maintain control over our machines, no matter how smart they might become. And I don't want to just traffic in the the Terminator Skynet scenario, but the thing about it is the scientists and engineers have this ability to make things that were once just flights of fancy very real. So it seems like we do need to think about that possibility at least, and how we could prevent that from happening.
Well, the key thing is, okay, so what's been out there, and I think maybe, who's this, Lawrence Tucker? What's been out there, I believe, is that there's been a lot of our thought process is formulated by movies, right, or what's in the media prior to something coming online. And I think that there's a balance to that. There's a yin yang, so there's good and bad to it. On the good side, I'll go with the bad first. On the bad side, it can create fear that's unfounded, which then creates, because you're really creating fear out of ignorance. Because see, it begins to formulate the mind, like, oh, you think, oh, I'm scared of that, but it hasn't even gotten here yet. So that fear can then be created out of ignorance, which can then be manipulated as well. But then on the good side, it also says, okay, let's keep things checked and balanced, right? So how do we as humans ensure that we are humanity and that these tools are our tools and they're serving us? And I think I alluded to it earlier, the ethics side, because in my mind, I think there's a lot of backstop organizations and ethic organizations that are watching, that are scientists, engineers that are watching AI to make sure it doesn't do this nefarious things. But then, what we really also have to do is always be watching each other as well. So the humans have to watch the humans versus, in my opinion, and in my mind, let's not take our eye off the ball and say, okay, let's just only look at how do we stop the machines. We also need to watch the humans around the machines, other ones who might not have good intentions for that. So the one who builds something will build it like, I'm an engineer. I want it to do the greatest good it can for my own personal life and how I grew up, and I don't want to see people suffer or get hurt. But someone could take my tools later on, or let's say, 50 years in the future, once I'm gone from this earth, or 60 or whatever, God, my house can do it, and then say, well, I'm just going to use it and destroy the earth. So we're always going to have that balance, Lawrence, between humans watching other humans and then humans watching the machines as well.
Yeah, and that's why I'm sorry. And that's why I asked, because a part of the history of the development of technology seems to be this constant lag between the rates at which technologies develop and the rates at which we evolve, legal, ethical, political, and social norms governing the uses of those technologies. And those always seem to be behind the development of the actual technologies themselves.
Well, one person, and I don't know if I've told David this, the one person I've really focused a lot on, and some of my friends would say, unless you're a little obsessed with him. I'm not him, not even close. Some people who are not that, they think I'm as smart. I don't even think close, but one of the individual scientists I still to this day really follow his work a lot is Nikolai Tesla. And a lot of people don't even know who he is. They know who Tesla, the car is, and they don't even know that even though Elon Musk is the CEO of Tesla, he didn't start Tesla. He went on Tesla. Well, let me not go personal. Okay, but he went there about 8 months after, because Tesla was started by 2 engineers out of Stanford. So, yeah, it's the truth. Just look it up. I mean,
yeah, I have read that he didn't originally start that company. I think he bought into it at some point.
Elon's very good at what he does, and then I may need to, me and David talked about that. I'm not as much of a marketer, even though I have a company and we're raising funds. And he's right, David's right. It is a startup. I've had it for 4 years, but we've been doing the research and the deep tech of the work of the patents versus like getting it out there. But it'll come out in its day. But Elon's very good at getting that awareness, because
promoting.
He's the current Henry Ford
right now. But it was funny because the guys had already built the car and everything. I mean, he just kind of Elon came on and like, okay, let's change the paint and make it more colorful and so forth and these things. But that being said, is that Nikolai Tesla though had wanted to give us alternative current versus direct current, which is what Edison does now. His patents are what we're using now. Everything that you're currently seeing, 80 to 90% is a result of Nikolai Tesla's patents back in the 1800s, literally. You can look it up. Just Wikipedia or Google Nikolai Tesla, and it's interesting. Wi-Fi and everything. Just if you reverse engineer or follow it backwards, you'll see. And so that was done back then. He wanted to have free electricity for everyone. That's what his intention was. Nikolai did not want to be super rich, he just wanted, and he fell out with J.P. Morgan and Edison, literally the J.P. Morgan banker and Edison over, the patents and so forth and what they wanted to do and use this research and work. So, Lawrence, to answer your question, there's always that yin-yang balance there.
Good. Hey, let me move on. I've got 2 more questions. We're almost at time. Hope you guys don't mind if we run over about 4 or 5 minutes. But I've got 2 more questions, but I know I wanted to, Jason Quick, he had a question that he put into the chat. Jason, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to read it for you? Okay, you'll ask the question. Great, perfect.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a different question. In one of your past interviews, you talked about Paul Romer. I believe he won a Nobel Prize in economic science for, he won a Nobel Prize for economics.
I talked about that. You're all right, though. So you're doing research, huh?
Yes, sir. You mentioned that he won it. Oh, thank you. He won it for economic growth and climate change. And then you go on to mention cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and NFTs. I'm wondering how will these technologies contribute to endogenous growth?
Okay, so real quickly, and that's going to be, we're going to have a follow-up question as well.
LS, I didn't announce it, but I'm going to announce because this is a 2-part series interview. But you can, if you want to touch on it, LS, please do. But I'm sorry to interrupt. But please answer the question in detail if you like. I'm sorry, Dave.
Well, my brain's going separately. David, feel free, because I'm really inspired by Jason's work. And I'll write you an email. I sent you my digital copy of my book, the 2017 edition. Feel free to share with the audience.
Yeah.
Liberal, digital.
I'm going to share your LinkedIn as well. Is okay?
Yeah. Well, I haven't been on LinkedIn in a while. So you can probably share, if they're going to share something, share my crowdfunding site. But the LinkedIn I don't even use as much. I haven't used it. But I'm on a Clubhouse in here because I get too caught up in social media. So I haven't been on LinkedIn in years, but I've been on Clubhouse and I'm basically on Instagram, and only because of the business. But then that's true. I'll show what to share. but I'm just stating, and we'll follow up with you offline, but I'm stating that, I'm saying it vocally and in the audience being recorded that it's okay to distribute to whomever you decide a free digital copy of my book. They can also buy it on Amazon if they want the hard copy at some point. But that book goes into Lauren's question. It's called The Bank for International Ideas, How Artificial Intelligence and Cryptocurrency Are Creating a New Economic Order. Now, the reason why I go into that, because I've been following Paul Romer's work, and Romer won the Nobel Prize in 2018 on economic science, in economic science, as Jason just stated, he won it with someone else. He won it too. But one was for climate change and the other was for ideas. And endogenous growth is this organic growth, where Romer states specifically, if we have ideas, and I had been tracking Paul, I had been doing the similar work and didn't know about Paul Romer until later. But we had been working on the same thread for about I was on it for, he's been doing it for 30 years. I've been doing it for about 15 years, so he's ahead of me. But basically, fundamentally, he's saying ideas, not startups even. He says ideas, and not so much patents like patent trolls, but if the idea creator can be compensated, those kind of ideas would ubiquitously grow an economic system where you won't have recessions. We won't need to play, Federal Reserve, inflation, lower interest rates, tweak interest rates. Romer discards all of that. We're living under, so Paul Romer's work is different than where we've currently been, because most of the current cycle is consumption, the cost of capital returns, you got productivity, and if that productivity is high enough, then you make a profit on that gain. So I'm just trying to simplify it. The bottom line is we go in a circle, this loop, where the rich can get richer because they can deploy capital. That capital has a higher productivity of return. Once that return comes back, they make even more money. And then in most economists' mind, they're supposed to then disperse that evenly to society, but they don't. They end up hoarding in a sense. That's why they're so rich. But Romer is saying it should be ideas, and it should come from the bottom in a sense up. And then the person who created the idea should be compensated for a period of time. And then, but other than that, the idea could be utilized to improve other things. So what he's talking about is the growth of ideas, just ideas themselves. And we don't have enough of that. That usually gets like, I think Lawrence was saying something earlier, that usually gets stifled by human greed or nefarious things. But about that point, we can discuss that with cryptocurrencies and how that's going, regardless of what China just did yesterday or 2 days ago.
Yeah, I sent you that link. So I know that we're just about at time, but this is a two-part series. Our second interview is going to be airing November 27th, where LS is going to be focused on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I don't know if you want to take a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, really, LS, to talk about what to sort of incentivize everyone to come back, and we'll have a larger crowd because we're going to be advertising that a lot broadly. I don't know if you want to take a couple seconds to talk about what we're going to be.
We can interchange. That'll be more focused on cryptocurrency, but I don't want to just only stay there. We can utilize where AI is. What we're really talking about is a new economic system that's coming online anyway, a digital system. That's all. I mean, if we really make this simplified, and there's two things about Bitcoin. I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2010, but I don't, now this shocks everyone and they still don't believe me. I've been involved in that space around 2010, 2011, yet I don't own any Bitcoin at all. I own no Bitcoin. And they're like, well, you're crazy, And I said, when my 2017 book, I predicted it would go up when it was only $900 a coin. But I never wanted to be in the speculative side. If I were going to do that, I would have just did stocks. I was always looking at it from the technology. And it's where that technology will be much bigger, and I'm predicting the future now, much, much bigger than where Bitcoin, the currency, could ever be. Because what you're talking about is the token. It's basically a tokenization technology, and it's a way to have a system that can work in space or work anywhere. And that's the real key about what Bitcoin, the technology, can do. And I'm not just talking about the blockchain ledger, which is just the way that you track, transactions. I'm talking about the technology itself and the ability to incorporate smart contracts that Jason alluded to, or anything else. But if let's say we colonize Mars one day, we can't be phoning back home to Bank of America and say, hey, can you wire some money up to the Mars colony and see that it gets there? I mean, that system wouldn't work.
I mean, how do you, I mean, I'm not talking just to you, LS, but to everyone else on the discussion today. I mean, how do you feel about a Black guy talking about this? I mean, I am proud, because that level of intelligence, it resides in our community, clearly resides in our community, clearly resides in our Black and Latino community, an Asian community, right? It resides there. You may not hear a lot about it, right? You may not hear a lot about it, but there are a couple of other folks like LS out there who absolutely have that. Kelvin, did you have a question before I ask my last question to LS? Kelvin Harris?
No, thank you for this, David. I was just applauding your last response, because me and you had a similar conversation earlier.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
I will definitely be back for part 2.
there you go.
My question really was already answered. Where do I get more information on a little bit less technical level about this, which is LS's book?
Yeah, and LS, I'd like you, if you can, because you sent me your information. I don't think you sent it to me in an email. You sent it to me on my phone, which I'm now using for a Clubhouse, so I can't necessarily pull it away and put it in the chat. If you want to put your book in the chat, that's great. You can do that. But while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you this last question. I mean, you, like me, are a father, right? I'm a father of 4 boys. You're a father of a rather successful young, I don't know if he's still in high school, but a young high school student who's got about a 4.8 cumulative. I mean, and so you've mentored men. You've mentored men, and you've talked, and you've helped instruct men. Most of the folks here, some of which are mid-career, full career, executive career, starting career, like Jason's really starting his career, Garfield's starting his career, Sheldon is in the middle of his career, Randy's in his career. Well, Kelvin is a city official, so he know where he is in his career, and so many of these folks are in their career. Derek's, in his, advanced in his career. But what would you, understanding the mixed environment that you're addressing, what advice would you have as a mentor to the multiplicity of attendees that we have today when it comes to AI? What is your advice to us about AI?
Okay, so, and then if you give me a few seconds, because I'm using my mobile too, I will go ahead and text the book description from Amazon in the chat. I'll put that in the chat. I'm just saying before we end, once I answer the question, I haven't done it yet. I'll put the book chat and then I'll put my current company of AIEDC where we are, because they can read about my bio and my team and, director of NASA and all of that kind of stuff if they decide. But then they'll get enough information. That's the most current information about me versus finding stuff that's not so current. But to answer your question, because I always like to communicate as well. And then a second note, as you can follow up, because you know most of the attendees, David, you have the book. They will need to get the book emailed, the digital copy of the book. I will show them where the physical book is if they want to buy it on Amazon. And I only make like $2, so I don't really care, but you can distribute the digital copy to them as well for free, so that they don't have to. The book is like $26 on Amazon or something. They make more money, but it's a hardcover book. That's why. But you can give them the digital copy for free, and they can just download that, and that could be via email. But to answer your question for technology or AI specifically for men and women that are minorities and so forth, and that are kind of, and all people, I think that knowledge and understanding is the future. We're really laying, and I'll speak probably more about this in November, but we're really laying, and I talked to you about this, David, we're at the point mentally, okay, I'm just going to take us in a time machine, that when most people don't understand, even America and across all civilization, when there was the Industrial Revolution, the biggest thing wasn't so much the combustible engine that we think of. I'm talking about for moving a society forward. It wasn't the automobile and it wasn't the steam engine boat. It was actually the laying of railroad tracks so that the trains could move industry stuff across the country. And that's really where that boom came from. Because still everything else was slower, even when we had automobiles or you had steamboats and so forth. And this is before the airplanes, all right? We were laying these railroad tracks. And so first you lay the railroad tracks and then these trains go over these tracks carrying, commercial goods, industrial goods, prior to the shipping containers that come from China and everything else. So I'm taking us back to like the early 1900s. And this really spawned, in addition to, of course, the combustible engine, you have to have the engine to make the train run, of course. But then how do you then transport? The transportation side was key. Because you could have, this car or this train, but it had to be able to go somewhere. Right now, what AI is doing, it's just artificial intelligence, in my opinion, are the train tracks being digitally laid across the world. And this is why he's kind of known to be a king now in China, but this is why the president of China, Xi Jinping, says AI is significant. This is why, Vladimir Putin says whoever controls AI will control the world. And so you see these initiatives in these countries, and now America, of course, we're catching up. I mean, we were always first in Silicon Valley, but we were first for commercial, sort of consumption. Like we use AI for Alexis, like show me a good movie on Netflix, but we don't use it to build things. But these other countries, like China specifically, which is scary, is using AI all across. They're laying these tracks as a macro initiative, trend, commercialization, everything. So is Russia. And so these countries, and India, if they can catch up, they will bypass the US if the US doesn't catch up with artificial intelligence, because it is going to be, or it is, the railroad tracks. Now, these trains that run on the tracks are separate, and those trains can be anything. China's putting trains on the track that carry, let's say, industrial goods, and we're so far in America, in my opinion, we've used more AI for consumption of entertainment than anything else, and social media and so forth. So I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with that. It's all good, but that's where 90% of our intelligence is for consumption of entertainment, and then to find out what the citizens are doing, so to speak, versus an industrialization of it, an industry standpoint. So to the group, I would say get to understand artificial intelligence, what it is, read up on it. If you got questions, let David know. I mean, he can ping me. I mean, it's not as difficult as people try to make it sound. If you think about it in the sense of railroad tracks, because it's easy for us as humans to look back and go, well, I know how railroad tracks work, and I know how the trains bring the goods in. It's a no-brainer because we're looking backwards. But back at that time, it probably looked very scary because the whole world was on horse and wagon. They didn't even know what a moving vehicle was. So just try to get to understand artificial intelligence as much as you can. And there's a lot of people that have simplified what it can do.
Listen, I know we're 12 minutes past here, and it doesn't seem like there's an end to the questions. I know Marilyn has a question about healthcare. Jay, Ellis, you got a couple minutes?
I'm good.
Marilyn?
Thank you. For my entire life, I've been in the healthcare field. 3 years ago, I pivoted to cybersecurity. And this summer, I participated in my first group called Women in AI. It was a global group. And I noticed that the international women appeared to be more advanced in their usage and innovation of AI than we are, meaning American women. And so that started me thinking. And I just wanted to ask you if you would give us one concrete example that will stay on our minds until next month when we hear you again about how AI can change healthcare trajectories to improve our quality of life.
And Ellis, before you go there, Ellis, I just wanted to make mention of next month is October. That's our 3rd year anniversary of the Hustlers Club being formulated. Ellis is not going to be speaking next month in October. He'll be speaking in November. But next month, Devin Bryant, the co-founder Julian Waits, the co-founder, Larry Whiteside, the co-founder, and Carlos Edwards, the co-founders of Cyversity, ICMCP. We'll be interviewing them next month, which is the 23rd of October, and then the 27th of November, LS will be back. So keep an eye out because I'll be advertising it and then sending stuff directly to your emails. But LS, please, the question.
No, and go ahead, give me a moment, keep talking though. Go ahead and explain, David, because I'm trying to send
his camera fell off the off the realm there. I know.
Well,
Jason,
no, I'm trying to send the chats.
Okay, Jason, I know you had a question as well. We know what Marilyn's question is relative to AI. Jason, did you have another question? Jason, quick.
I can wait, sir.
I want to hear the question now because I want to queue it up to give them both back, if you don't mind, Jason, back to, so I can have those questions back to back for LS.
Oh, one moment.
And if anyone else has any questions, LS is going to be around with us for a couple of minutes. So I don't want to be here all Saturday with him and you guys taking up all of your Saturday. But if you got anybody else has questions, let's get our questions ready and let's do a speed round with LS.
He mentioned that, well, in one of his PowerPoints, he has multiple verticals, but among the top 3 verticals was the travel industry, followed by transport and logistics. And he was saying that these markets have the most potential incremental value from AI over other analytic techniques. I was wondering why in particular these industries?
Well, let's answer the first question about healthcare, and then we could move over to Jason's question.
Okay, so just you want to confirm, you should have the 2 texts in the chat. I think I sent the book. Can you see it, David?
Yep, I saw it. Yep, I had sent it out a little earlier.
The book description, and then there's my current, that's my crowdfunding campaign for my company, but it just has the information. I mean, I don't need people to participate unless they want to, but it just has the information on my bio, my team. Something we didn't touch upon. To everyone, I said, as long as you keep powering forward, you can see this. My chairman of my company, like David said, it is a startup in a sense. It's just been longer, but is the former program director of NASA. And my other board member is the chief machine learning technical lead at AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. So to David's point, in minorities, we can do a lot of things if we understand knowledge and we reach out and we create a community. we're able to do the work we want to do and get out there. So that being said, regarding healthcare, that's correct. I think to leave, and I'm trying to just say as a capstone without a lot of reading. So we're kind of responding to this COVID-19 issue. But this is truth, okay? This is not, who was that asked the question? What's the young lady's name?
My name is Marilyn Harris, and I'm out of Houston.
Okay, Marilyn. I didn't need your full name, Marilyn, but I wanted to address you, but thank you very much. So Marilyn, what I'm gonna say is a footnote that is completely factual, but may not sound like factual, but you asked a question about AI in healthcare. So there was a team that utilized artificial intelligence for the efficacy to talk about COVID-19, of that it would spread, what countries it would spread to, the impact it would have. And this team did that in October of 2019. And they went to the WHO, the World Health Organization. It's a team it's a small company out of, what about 30 people, mostly AI, and then efficacy and scientists. And they said this virus is going to grow and spread. And so, and they have certain, medical clients up there and out of Canada and so forth. But they went to the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization says, we just think that your system is over predicting this virus. We don't see that at this time, yada, yada. So circa February, of 2020, the WHO brings that same company back as the lead AI to see how can they mitigate COVID because it's spreading so rapidly. So some will say, was it just, human fumbling? But to ask about AI prediction, it did predict a virus. So you can detect it when it's known. And the intriguing thing about it is that I believe they were 100% accurate exactly on what country it would go to, how many people were about, how many people that would be affected, and then what next country it would go to, sequentially in the order. So it did literally leave China in around December, and then it went over to Taiwan or some other areas, and then it migrated over to Europe, and then it migrated also to the West, to the US. So by March of 2020, the president, which happened to be President Trump at the time, says we're in a pandemic, right? And it goes from an epidemic to a pandemic. So to answer your question as a footnote, that's what AI can do and what it's already done. But that story isn't out a lot. I mean, but you can still find it. The company's correct and who said it. And I don't think it was as, I want to be clear though, I don't think it was evil intent or some group saying, suppress the information. It's just the scientists or the health scientists in healthcare didn't believe it because they didn't think, I guess, the system could predict it. And I guess they wanted to study it more. So there's always that balance of that yin yang of humans and technology as well. Hello?
Unmute yourself, Dave. I'm on mute. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
Apologies. Jason, really quick, your question again, please.
In one of your PowerPoints, you mentioned various verticals, and among the top three were, just a second, it was the travel industry, transport, and logistics. I was wondering, sorry, trying to find it.
No problem. I know what you're referencing. Well, if I talked about travel industry and logistics and so forth, was it relating to AI or economics? Because I'm in both worlds in that sense.
It was related to AI and the analytics over other methods. And why with these industries, why are these the top three?
Oh, okay. So yeah, because a lot of this is pre-COVID as well. So what there is there's been known about what industry. So we see it's interesting because we actually have to, Jason, almost go pre-COVID. We have to go post-COVID versus pre-COVID. Because our minds now, we have that knowledge of COVID, and there's been a lot COVID-19, but not so much for the virus, but how this, the transportation industry has changed, right? And the logistics industry has changed because there's still human elements of it. So prior to that, there was a lot of research on what industries would be most affected by AI, given the trajectory was the same. I have to be clear and in full disclosure, that's not true anymore because the policies, as a result, and they needed to be, I guess, well, they did. They needed to be there. The policies for COVID-19, the restrictions, and I'm not talking about the vaccine. I'm just talking about the restrictions and the curtailing of how society is, has sort of changed that trajectory. And because now you don't have the hospitality industry is the way it was, you don't even have the logistics industry the way it was, or the transportation industry the way it was. So back then, it was saying AI had the most impact of those industries. I think, which is funny, I think as a result of COVID-19, and my personal opinion is I don't see this going away for a few years. Sorry to say this, sorry to be a joy killer. I'm looking at the science and data, and we're not going to get back to like, okay, it's over and we're past it. I mean, the politicians will say that, but it's going to take some time. And now AI can affect even more industries because we're kind of moving into a more digitization, automation world because we're going to have to do it. And that's a more fair statement and fair answer to the question, Jason, because prior to that, prior to COVID-19, the entire system of the world was different of how the trajectory was heading. But now it's kind of moved across. So there might have been 3 sectors I name or 5 sectors. Now I think it's all sectors. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I think it's all sectors. I mean, if you look at like Australia right now, they have some of the strictest lockdowns around the world where nothing moves unless it's moving digitally there. right now in Australia. So
Good. Hey, guys, listen, we're at 23 minutes after the hour. I really want to thank LS for coming in and speaking to us. It's not often we get something outside of cybersecurity to focus on and to discuss, but this is a great topic. So in November, come back again. We'll come back next month, October, to hear from the founder of Cyversity, right? And of course, I'll invite you, LS, to come to that call with Marilyn, Jason, Derek, Kelvin, Carlos, Lawrence, Janice. Hey, Janice, thanks for coming back after last month. Thanks for coming back. Sheldon, Garfield, Rhonda, Lewis, my man Lewis, right? Randy, it's good to see you and hear from you again. Same here, Serenity. I hope the move went to Virginia went well. And Raphael, I thank you all for coming, and I really appreciate you all for joining us today. Next month is our anniversary. Come and bring a drink. come next month, and let's hear from our founders. And the month after that, we'll have the second part of our two-part series with LS focused on cybersecurity, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and many other things. Thanks again, everyone, and thanks for showing up.